News, views, voices of the global Indian community. India abroad.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Would you please share what your tenure in India, as well as your prior experiences as LA mayor, has shown you about the importance of the American Indian contribution to the United States, our nation?
Well, thank you. And as I mentioned casually on the way up, welcome to the American Center. This is your home. How many people first time here, just out of curiosity? We especially like those first time hands, and welcome back old friends who have come here, whether it's to study in our library, whether it's to come for some of our cultural programming and art exhibitions, maybe meet with our Department of Commerce folks to expand your business here in India. This is really a one-stop shop that is part of our mission. Not to say that Indian Americans, as you hear in this book, didn't face and don't still today face sometimes immense discrimination, racism, barriers. But by and large, what you see now is, in more cases than not, the full-scale acceptance of, integration of, and contributions of the American part of Indian Americans into the American story. And maybe I would end by saying, the answer to that question, the inverse. If you took Indian Americans away from the American story today, it would look incomplete. The economy would be less advanced. The research and innovation we have would be not has gone as far. The communities we would have would be less culturally rich. And I would say that for most Americans, still that sleeping giant that is there, Americans are only beginning to not only build that bridge to India, but to Indian Americans. Like most Americans don't know that America is the second biggest number of hours of streaming cricket in the world of any country. And most Americans are like still asking, what's cricket again? And when you look at that, I think it's just a matter of time before we see in the coming decade that integration will go even further, stronger, faster, and deeper, and it will resonate on both sides of the Indo-Pacific.
Why does Prime Minister Modi spend so much time courting and interacting with the diaspora, especially the Indian American diaspora, right? So obviously one reason is domestic politics here in India. Plays pretty well when you go to my hometown of Houston, Texas, and you can fill a National Football League stadium with 55,000 kind of adoring Indian Americans, right? That makes for pretty good pictures and copy. But I think it goes beyond that, right? I think number two, when you're India, thinking about, two important inputs you need for India's own domestic transformations, right? One of them is capital, and the other is technology transfer, right? And obviously the United States is a source of both of those things, but specifically Indian Americans in leading positions in both of those fields, right? In the venture capital world, in the Fortune 500 world, people are doing cutting edge work in the world of technology. The third is that, I think we've seen, and Meena gave the example of the U.S.-India civil nuclear deal, that Indian Americans have been ambassadors generally for stronger and deeper U.S.-India ties. I would give another example. When the COVID second wave happened in India, and there was a sense really of panic amongst, I think, maybe many people in this room, but certainly many of my friends in Delhi. I think, to be very blunt about it, I think the U.S. government was a little bit flat-footed, hadn't quite figured out that it was this bad. And that's when Indian Americans started to pick up the phone, and they started to call people at the White House, and they started to call members of Congress. And within a matter of days, you could see the ship turning around. Now, the ship would have turned around anyway, but the point is, I think the pace with which it turned around was due to the intervention of Indian Americans. And then the last thing I'll say is that, they have become influential political actors in the United States, right? Despite accounting for a relatively thin slice of the population. They have become important campaign donors, right? They've behind every successful politician, we have at least one sitting at the stage, there are a group of influential Indian Americans who have helped them sort of get where they are, right? They're incredibly high propensity voters. So, the estimates are that 96% of registered Indian American voters actually turn out on election day, which is a, phenomenal number. And last but not least, I think you see this now more than ever, is that they're being courted on both sides politically, right? Yes, this is a group that has historically voted for the Democratic Party. But certainly for the last two presidential cycles, we've seen both major party candidates, dedicate web pages, right, manifestos targeting Indian Americans and South Asian Americans more generally.
New York Times reporter that some of you may know, her name is Somani Sengupta, who was stationed in Delhi for a while. And she's also been stationed in Silicon Valley. And we were sitting there talking about artificial intelligence. And many of you must have seen all the information out there about artificial intelligence recently and how it's impacting us. And she said, everyone's talking about artificial intelligence. Everyone knew who Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were. But our lives are going to be so impacted by this, and the people who are making the decisions about things that are going to influence us and impact us and affect us are people like Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai, but people don't know who they are. And that story needs to be told. So that made me go back and think, and I decided, that story does need to be told, and I started doing research on Silicon Valley and places where Indians were having a transformational impact. So there are a lot of wealthy and successful Indians in America, there's no doubt. But I decided to focus on 3 areas where Indians were having a really big impact. And I decided to focus on tech, medicine, and public policy.